In this episode, we are going to be reviewing the film noir, or is it a noir? Don't Bother to Knock from 1952. This was directed by Roy Ward Baker. It was based on a novel by Charlotte Armstrong called Mischief. The screenplay was by Daniel Teradash, and it starred Richard Widmark, Marilyn Monroe, Anne Bancroft, and Elisha Cook Jr. Welcome to Robert Bellissimo at the Movies. This is a YouTube video podcast where we explore movies from all over the world and talk about how those stories were told on film, as well as interviews with various industry professionals who work in film, television, and theater. If you're watching this now on the YouTube channel, please consider subscribing. I want to welcome back to the channel Mike White, who is the host of one of my favorite podcasts, the Projection Booth podcast, which is a podcast I really, really love. Mike, welcome back. Thanks for joining me again.
Thank you so much for having me. It's so nice being here.
It's great to have you. And I know last month, we were, trying to figure out what film to look at again. And now we've jumped on another. Well, this is interesting because I always thought it was a noir and I hadn't seen it before. And I watched it and I was like, there are no tropes, but I'm not too sure. So I know you hadn't seen it either. So would you put that in the noir category, or what did you think?
Yeah, it's a tough call, man. It is really a real tough call. I mean, it doesn't follow a lot of the noir tropes as far as, it's a pretty linear storyline. It's unusual that we've got a female protagonist. I suppose that Marilyn Monroe's our protagonist. We don't really have any voiceover narration. I mean, my definition of noir is, and this is not mine, but it's what I usually go by as far as like you're effed at the beginning of the movie and you're even more effed at the end. Right. But I have to say she might not be worse off at the end of the film. So
that's true.
What a bizarre film this was.
Yeah, it really was. And I know some films do, like even like The Big Heat has an optimistic ending, even though it's such a hard, dark story. And I know sometimes noir did have some and this more upbeat endings, perhaps with some loose ends. And this certainly falls in that category. But for me, I just felt it was like a great, a drama with some thriller aspects, some noir aspects. I mean, the noir themes that popped out to me is, you have your alienated protagonist. I suppose there's two protagonists. So being Marilyn Monroe, being this woman who was, abused emotionally and physically by her parents. Her boyfriend died. He was a pilot, and here she is alone in New York in this hotel. So that, New York hotel. So it had a certain, lone person quality. And, then Richard Widmark's cynical, unfeeling, and certainly that's a noir trope. And just the aspect of Marilyn Monroe being, she's certainly not a femme fatale, but it's almost like it's a play on the femme fatale in the sense that they've deepened it or flipped it or made you empathize much more with her, because she had that quality where she was after money and people who could get her things. For example, she's a babysitter for the night in this hotel for this rich couple, and she's trying on the woman's clothes, she's putting on the makeup, and once she, Richard Widmark is, sort of calling over to her in the hotel, then she gets the idea, well, maybe he'll be the next guy who can, get me all these things. But whereas in a lot of noirs, you don't really know why the women are after, you don't necessarily know their backstory, which I like. And so you don't know why they're so, perhaps greedy. But in this case, my heart went out to her because of the fact that she had a parents who wiped makeup off her face and never allowed her to have anything nice. So I thought, well, god damn it, someone buy this woman some earrings. I mean, I
Right.
didn't play her or makeup. I honestly, didn't have any sort of, it's hard feelings or felt like, oh, she's up to no good kind of thing. I don't know if that was something that you thought of.
Yeah, she didn't have a lot of guile, and she was not a good liar at all. It
Yeah,
was
that's true.
interesting. Yeah, it was interesting that she's blonde, and meanwhile downstairs you've got Anne Bancroft, who's a brunette. So you're kind of flipping it a little bit. Just that this whole thing is set at this hotel is very interesting, and that
Mhm.
her brother, Marilyn Monroe's brother, is Elisha Cook Jr., who's a bellboy, like the world's oldest bellboy at this hotel. So he's kind of tying these stories together. Widmark is tying the stories together because I don't think it's until the very end of the film that you get a scene where you have Bancroft and Monroe in the same shot,
Yeah.
because most of the
Yeah.
time you're upstairs or you're downstairs. And so
Yeah.
it's one world or another. And there's a lot of times where this feels more like a stage play than it feels like a movie,
That's
just
true.
because you've got these very limited sets. I could almost see the stage being divided in two, and you've
Yeah.
got the upstairs room and then the bar downstairs.
I didn't even think of that. That's true.
And
Yeah.
then to your point, you do have the voyeurism of having Widmark looking across the way and then like really being a creep. I mean, even
Yeah.
this movie reminded me a lot of uh, Who Killed Teddy Bear. This whole thing of
Oh,
like,
yes. Yes.
it's not dirty phone calls, but the way that he figures out which room is hers and
Yeah.
then gives her a call and then he's peeping at her through the window and stuff. I'm just like, man, who's creepier right now, her or him? And it
That's a good
almost feels
call.
like they're
Yeah.
perfect creeps to fit together until he realizes this girl's fucking crazy. I need to get out of here.
Yeah, that's a good point. So it certainly had a lot of noir tropes. So yeah, I mean, I suppose it's one of those noir or nots, right? It's up to the audience. So people watching, comment and let us know what you think. Just a tiny correction was that Elijah Cook Jr. was her uncle, actually.
Oh, my bad. My
Yeah.
bad.
Just get in case the don't bother to knock, hardcore buffs are gonna be, yelling at me later.
Yeah, no,
um,
I knew
but
they were family members for some reason. I thought, and that makes a lot more sense because he is so much older than she is.
yeah,
So that fits together a lot more. But he's the only entree into her backstory because she will give little glimpses of the backstory, but he's really the guy who's
yeah,
just like, well, you don't understand.
yeah,
I'm like,
yeah.
okay.
Yeah, he fills Richard Widmark in on some of the details that she was in a mental institution before, and now she's in New York, and he's helping her out and things like that. Again on the with the exception of like what the film is actually about, just in terms of the cast, it's a very noir cast. You got
Oh boy.
Widmark, you've got Elisha Cook Jr. So it's, I mean, Marilyn Monroe was not really known for noirs, but another well-known noir is Niagara, the
Yeah.
color noir, I suppose.
And then Anne Bancroft was in Nightfall, I think it is,
That's
the
right.
David Goodis adaptation. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So, it had the cast, certainly people would be familiar with a lot of them from a number of film noirs. But, what do you think this film to you was really exploring? I was curious what you thought the essence of the story was about.
I think it's the how damaged people are and how they interact, but because you can tell that Widmark is damaged. There's something definitely going on
Yes.
there.
Yeah.
The way that he and Bancroft are, Bancroft just seems so super sincere about things, and you're really pulling for her. To me, she's like the hero of the film, but she's
Mhm.
barely in it. And
Right.
it's mostly just like show up, get abused by Widmark, sing a song, repeat.
Yeah.
And but she's the person, she's really the grounding of this whole film. And by the way, I can't believe you didn't mention Jim Backus. Come on.
Oh my god. And now I feel even worse that I'm like, that name doesn't even ring a bell. Was
Oh
he? Oh,
boy.
sorry, he was the father, right?
Yeah,
Yeah, from
he's
Rebel Without a Cause, of course.
right. Well, and of course Mr. Howell from Gilligan's Island.
Gilligan's
So
I you know, it's
yeah.
so many episodes of this show where people, because I don't know that show, like I know of
Oh
it,
boy.
and people will say, "Hey, that Gilligan's Island." I'm like, and I always are kind of like, sorry, I'm a classic film fan, not necessarily a classic TV guy. So,
Really shitty TV show.
yeah, he plays, the good-natured father in this.
Right. But yeah,
Yeah,
to me, it's very much the, how Widmark is out of sorts with so much. And then it almost takes him seeing Marilyn Monroe and just how damaged she is for him to realize, like, oh, wow, it could be a lot worse. And maybe things aren't as bad as I thought. And I think, she pretty much forces him to re-examine himself and then get back
yeah.
with Bancroft and maybe not treat her as horribly as he was.
That's interesting that you put it that way, because I certainly saw that he was, also severely damaged in his, that was a very noir thing, that he was unfeeling, that he lacked compassion, that he lacked empathy, that he lacked heart, and this is why Anne Bancroft didn't want to be with him anymore. And I was actually wondering, what was it about Monroe that he suddenly was able to be all the things that Anne Bancroft wanted him to be, was to have a heart, to have feelings, to feel for others. And I that actually makes sense, that he saw himself in her.
Right.
That's actually, because I really was I mean, I suppose it's not so open ended. I guess it's a little more obvious than I thought. Because on the one hand, you're right, like he is such a sleaze off the top, and he's actually quite cold with Anne Bancroft in the bar, and even that poor woman who was like trying to sell him photos and stuff, like, and he's shooing
Yeah.
her
Oh,
away. He's like, I'll just give you the money just to like stop bothering me. And suddenly he, as he gets to know Monroe and he sees, like, oh man, like this woman's got some severe psychological problems. He feels for her, but then at the same time is thinking, how am I how am I gonna get out of here? But I like the movie. I just, for me, what perhaps I think would have been much better is like another hour, because it was so short, and we had these really interesting characters with these interesting problems that are really just, they really get to the point so quickly,
mhm.
and it's done so simply. You got your character changing halfway through over what they have discovered, for the better, and a strong resolution between, the conflict between Anne Bancroft and Richard Widmark, and even somewhat for the Monroe character. So it was rather conventional. Not that that's always necessarily a bad thing, but to me, it was just kind of like, let's just connect the dots and bang this one out. So I wanted more. Like, I just thought it was way too condensed. I don't know if that was how you felt.
Yeah, I kept wondering, what is this book like, because this was based on a
Yes.
novel from the previous year by Charlotte Armstrong called
Yeah.
Mischief.
Right.
It kind of reminded me a little bit of the book version of why am I blanking on it, the one with Gloria Graham and Humphrey Bogart.
Oh, In a
um
Lonely Place.
Thank you. It kind of reminded me of the book of In a Lonely Place, especially with Dixon Steele just being so damaged.
Oh,
And
that's a good comparison.
I think too that, coming out in 51, this really feels like a post-war, because I know that they talk about how Widmark is a pilot, and but I'm
Yeah,
wondering, was he also a pilot in the war? And
I
it
was
just
wondering
feels
that
like,
too.
yeah, because I think her boyfriend was a pilot in the war, I want to say. And so then it makes sense if Widmark is also damaged by the war and, has come back and he's not the person that maybe Bancroft thought that he was, and has a lot of PTSD.
Yeah, that would have been something that would have been really interesting to have explored, because he's a pilot and Philip was a pilot and Philip died. And so, of course, once she sees that Richard Widmark is a pilot, it's almost as if she thinks he's back from the grave, like she's calling him Philip.
Right.
So this is when we begin to see that there's clearly something wrong with her. But yeah, that would have been really interesting. And it makes me want to look at the novel as well, because yeah, not that you necessarily have to tell the audience everything about why these people are behaving this way, but like the suggestions, like some kind of suggestions or something to explore, to talk about, would have been, I think, more emotionally grabbing. It would have given it a lot of depth. Some of the criticisms it got at the time, people like basically said it's really enjoyable, the performances are great, but it just lacked sort of emotional depth. And I think that's fair.
Mhm.
You know,
Yeah, I mean, it's a tough situation. Adapting a book is always a tough situation. How much do you go for the backstory? I mean, to your point, this feels like it was very rich. I want to go out, I want to find this book and read it, because it does feel like there's a lot more to this. And the entree that we have via the film, I mean, it does give you some stuff, but it's interesting enough that I want to pursue more. So it's not
mhm.
like, well, okay, I've seen this, I'm done with it. Like, it's one that I'm like, yeah, what's the story with this? What actually
Yeah,
happened with
exactly.
this?
Exactly. And when you finish when you, like, I think a really good movie, not when you finish it, at least my experience is, oh, I want to go now read the book. Because
Right.
I mean, I may want to read the book anyways, but if that's something that's like one of my first thoughts, then the film lacks something if I want to now get a deeper look at it. But apart from that, it's certainly enjoyable. I thought Monroe, though, Marilyn, was really really good. I mean,
Oh
some
yeah.
people feel like this is not really even that well known of a film compared to obviously a lot of the classics that she was in the 1950s. What did you think of her in this?
Yeah, this was definitely a different role than I've seen her play before. I mean, I have to admit that I'm not that well versed in her filmography. It wasn't
Yeah,
until a few months ago that I finally saw Gentlemen Prefer Blondes.
yeah.
And then I'm trying to remember, we watched like two, How to Marry a Millionaire was the other one. We watched those back to back. And then yeah, Niagara, I hadn't seen that until like right before the pandemic. And so it's like just had been slowly catching up with her filmography. So far I have yet to see a role that she can't tackle.
Right.
I think she has this reputation of being just a pretty face, but everything that I've seen her in, I think she's great, and she knows how to play the sexiness, the vulnerability, and
Absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
she handles it very well. It didn't feel like she was outmatched by anybody else in this film. And to your point, these are some heavy hitters. Like, yeah, this was Anne Bancroft's first film, but Widmark, I mean, to me, he's kind of the king of film noir.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that's true. I mean, she really brought her soul to everything. Like when you read a lot of stories that came out on a lot of films that she was in, like some like it hot, where sometimes she couldn't even get her lines out because of her, either her anxiety, or she was showing up so late or whatever. And you think, how did they even finish the film? Because then you look at the film and she's always great. So you're
Oh
thinking,
yeah.
how did this? She obviously always was able to pull it together. Or I know she had coaches and there was help involved, but there was also conflict involved, right?
Right.
But this was obviously early on, so I was trying to find if there were some stories about the making of this. I didn't really find much. I don't know if you happened to come across anything. Yeah, there wasn't really too much about the making of this. If anyone watching knows some trivia about the making of this, feel free to comment below and let us know. What the relationship between her and the little girl that she's babysitting,
Oh boy.
um, Bunny, Donna Corcoran. I haven't seen her in, heard of her or seen her in much else. But I was like scared for her at a certain point.
Oh boy.
This poor
Yeah.
kid, because here she is getting babysat by a stranger, and then she realizes that this person is now someone that she's not, and bringing a man in, and You know, she ties her up, she almost throws her out the window.
Oh
There was
boy.
some scary scenes there, and what was appealing for me was the fact that Monroe's character Nell, she talks about the fact that she was whipped by her parents and you know, verbally and emotionally abused, and now she is basically abusing this child. So did you see that as like the abused person now becoming the abuser, I
Oh
suppose, you know?
yeah, definitely. If it's good enough for me, it's good enough for her. And I thought that she played it well, Donna, that I'm talking about here, Bunny.
Yes.
That she was sympathetic, but she was so bratty at the same time, and you just wanted to be like, "Kid, shut up." The whole like, "You're wearing my mother's stuff,
Yeah,
and how
yeah.
dare you put on her earrings," and all this. It felt very. I rely on this movie way too much. It kind of reminded me of Death Game, where Sandra Locke and Colin Camp kind of break into or just make their way into Seymour Cassell's house, and they
Oh,
start
yeah, I
wearing his
still have to
wife's
see that.
stuff. Oh
Yeah.
boy.
Yeah,
But they start wearing
yeah.
the wife's stuff, and he's almost like the, you know, the goldfish from the Cat in the Hat, just like, no, no, you're not supposed to do this. Your mother's going to be home any minute now. And like, that's kind of like, you know, Bunny was like the conscience of the film.
Yeah.
And I know this sounds horrible, but I kind of wish I had seen this with an audience, because I can just imagine the peals of laughter when they do that reveal and show her tied up in bed. Because myself, I was laughing my ass off. Just, it was such an unexpected turn for me. Just like when he is there at the door and looks in, you know, yeah, Bunny's nice and quiet.
Yeah, and then he realizes, yeah, that, see, that was another moment that I thought, that was rather contrived, because then
Yeah,
he finds a way to get out of there, because of the neighbors outside. You know, they
the
get concerned
nosy
because they,
neighbors. Yeah,
yeah, the nosy neighbors who nearly see Monroe push the little girl out the window, so they come over, and then he gets away, and then suddenly he realizes, oh, wait a minute, she was in the other bed, you know, or it was something. It really was not quite clear exactly how he
right.
suddenly didn't he suddenly realized that he didn't see her in the bed. I guess they just couldn't figure out another way to get him back up there. You know, this is before texting, hey, I'm up, you know, I'm tied up, come back, you know. Not that she would have his number, but
Right, right.
yeah, that was, you know, that was rather convenient. But but I just like the fact that she was, you know, you could see Nell as the little girl being blamed for everything, being
Hmm.
criticized, her parents perhaps making assumptions about her, because she is blaming this little girl for everything. It's like the fact
Right.
that she came in or was crying or was wondering why, like, that's like, how can you blame this little girl for doing that? But it's like, no, this is your fault. And now Richard Widmark has run away because of you, and you could so
Oh,
see that that was her when she was young. I
yeah.
thought that was, again, psychological, simple, but rather, you know, emotional and accurate for. I mean, I'm no expert on, you know, abuse, but you know, I imagine that's very much psychologically what was going on there.
Right. Yeah. You can really see the way that Monroe sees herself in this other actress and
Absolutely.
in this character. And then, yeah, that complete psychological, she just crumbles. I mean, Marilyn Monroe does a really good job of just falling apart at
Oh
the end of
yeah.
this movie.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. It was also, I like the fact that Elijah, you know, usually when I see Elisha Cook Jr., he's like, he's a total, you know, he's a total up to no good sleaze
Oh, yeah.
scumbag, and he's so good in these North. But what was different about him here was like he was like this nice guy, and he was like took his job maybe a little too seriously. You know, he talked about the fact that he was there for 14 years. He has that classic elevator line. And I know myself, I used to work in a theater where we had to like manually operate an elevator. The amount of
Wow.
times I heard the joke, this job has a lot of ups and downs, doesn't it? And he says that, right, to them. And I think that was sort of like a metaphor for the story, you know, for everything. There was your other everything was happening upstairs, and while everyone was downstairs, right? So but he was rather nice. I mean, I hadn't seen him play like this really nice guy, but then suddenly you did begin to see some of his and it wasn't that he was doing anything so bad, but I mean, he was right to tell Marilyn Monroe, take their clothes off, take their makeup off, but it was just the way he did it. I felt it was rather like he just really scolded her. Like it was kind of
Yeah.
like he belittled her about it. I thought that was I wondered if Elijah Cook Jr. sort of really approached it that way to sort of really tear into her, as opposed to just being like, hey, take that off, what are you doing? Or if it just happened in the moment. I mean, no one knows, but I thought he played that rather well. I don't know how you felt about it.
Oh yeah, I love him whenever
He's
he
so
shows up in
good.
anything. Yeah,
Yeah,
whether it's just a little walk-on part or I mean, this is a pretty big part for him, I would say, because this isn't,
it really was.
yeah,
Yeah.
this isn't Wilmer or, I'm trying to remember the drummer. What was that from
Oh, and
Screaming Mimi?
Phantom Lady.
Yes, thank you. And it's just, yeah, he wasn't being cuckolded. He wasn't being a little pipsqueak
Right.
gangster. He
Right.
wasn't being,
Cheated on, like in the Killing.
exactly. So yeah, you felt for this guy, and yeah,
For sure.
maybe what he did to Nell was not the best way of doing it, and that was probably just the thing. He's trying to be this surrogate father role, so no matter what he's doing, he's already put into a losing position because
Mhm.
of the previous experience. But yeah, I thought his character was trying his best, and he
Mhm.
was really trying to help her out and set her up with this babysitting job and all this. And just, yeah, I mean, Cook is just, he's one of those great undersung actors.
Oh, no, I totally agree. I can watch him in anything. I wish there was more Anne Bancroft, because she's
Yeah.
just a wonderful actor who's so underrated. I mean, I imagine most people, when they think of Anne Bancroft, they think of The Graduate, but she has played so many different kinds of parts and given some phenomenal performances where she's truly transformed herself. I mean, here again, another problem I had with the film is just that her character was handled very one dimensionally. It was kind of like, yeah, I don't want to be with you because you're cold, and then when she sees that he actually is warmer and more compassionate, she's like, oh, okay, let's be together. And I'm like, okay, but I
Yeah.
enjoyed her in it anyways, just because the fact. I mean, I think she's just terrific in general. But I wish there was more of her in this. That it was a better role.
Yeah. I mean, from what I understand, this was one of her first, if not her very first
It was her very
roles.
first. Yeah,
Wow. So
yeah,
yeah, I mean, she
yeah. She
really
was only
knocks it out
about
of the park.
20 here. She was only about
Wow.
20.
Yeah,
So
there were
this was.
times where I doubted that it was even her.
Well, yeah, yeah. I mean, again, because I imagine that you feel that way, because when I think of her, I think The Graduate. We fast forward 15 years. So yeah, I mean, she's just a kid, really, when you think about it, like 20. But I thought she was quite good. But we touched on the ending at the beginning, because it feels like a happy ending, and it certainly is more for Widmark and Bancroft, because she, like we just said, she sees that he actually obviously has a heart and these qualities that she wanted to see in him, and so they leave, hugging and happy, and so it's much more optimistic. And it seems as if, I don't know how you felt about this, but it seems as if Marilyn Monroe is now going to get help, that they're going to put her in a hospital in New York where they're going to help her. However, the only people who were compassionate towards her was Widmark. So,
Yeah.
like moments before that, the cops were gonna jump her. They're like, jump on her. They're like, she's in the lobby. They were saying that she's a maniac, she's violent, and Elijah Cook Jr. obviously was not as compassionate towards what she had gone through either. And so when they take her away, I'm like, where are they really? What is Widmark really gonna do? Even if he goes and
Right.
checks, what is he really gonna do? He doesn't. He doesn't have any sort of power to do much at the end of the day, right? So I don't know if that was sort of, that's what I love so much about this period, is that you get the feeling often they were pleasing the studio heads or the censors, and yeah, we'll have a happy ending here. But there's always just these kind of open-ended things that they do, whether it's a shot or a certain look someone gives, or in this case, she still be escorted out by a cop. So it makes you wonder, So I don't know how that sat with you.
Well, yeah, knowing that this was 52 when this came out, I'm just like, okay, what kind of, is she going to be taking a Bellevue? Is this like a big snake pit at this time? It's, I
Exactly.
know obviously Nellie Bly already had her thing and stuff, so mental institutions are a little bit better, but then I'm thinking of things like Shock Corridor. So it's just like, oh man,
Exactly.
what is she going into? Who's going to be abusing her in this new mental ward? Is it going to be help? Is she going to find some sort of guardian angel to help
Yeah.
her out, or is she just sunk?
Yeah. Yeah. It's certainly much more open ending than it,
Yeah.
than it makes you, you know, then it makes you feel like it's sort of because you're sort of going towards the Widmark character and seeing that worked out. So, but then the other side, and she's sort of smiling as well. She realizes, oh yes, you're not my dead boyfriend, and so I thought that was quite clever. Whether that was intentional to sort of give the feel of a little uneasiness, who knows? But it certainly felt uneasy to me. um,
Yeah.
I don't know this director at all. I don't know if you've seen any of his films.
Yeah, I know him more for his work with Hammer Studios than I do when it comes to his noirs or thrillers. So more like Asylum, or I want to say he did one or quite a few of the Dracula and Frankenstein movies. I know he did Legend of the Seven Golden Vampires, which is a bizarre film I managed to see on the big screen a few years ago. It's a weird mix of like Hong Kong horror with Western horror. So I think Christopher Lee's in there, and then you have like these Chinese vampires, and it's just like, what the heck is going on here? But yeah, so I was more familiar with his stuff that he did with Hammer than his earlier work.
Okay.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
the screenwriter, I know he did just an absolute ton of stuff, and including what I can only assume is the prequel, which was Knock on Any Door. Just kidding. Just kidding. Sorry.
I was literally about to go. I was like, oh, let me check. The prequel to
Yeah.
to Don't Look Back. Yeah, no, I I thought, oh, I was like, I wondered, oh, is he one of the well-known noir directors? And then I was, not that everyone who made noir was. I mean, they made so many film noirs, so
Right.
not everybody is, Robert Siodmak. I mean, but of course the aspect of it that is very, from the technical side, is you got Lucian Ballard as the DOP, who did, I mean, so many masterpieces and many noirs, The Killing and Laura. Um, he's not using the German expressionism. There isn't any of the shadows and light, or the bars over the eyes. But I
Mhm.
think it so the photography really didn't feel noir, but I think the location, just the claustrophobia, the tightness of the rooms, which is very noir. I mean, I
Right.
thought that they just sort of really captured it based on the setting, that they didn't really have to, well, you don't have to really do anything, but they didn't really make the choice to do anything to stylize the frame at all. But I didn't really think it necessarily needed it. It might have been interesting, but it felt appropriate for me to really just have these people in these rooms.
Mhm.
What you thought about that?
Yeah, and do I remember right that Elijah Cook Jr. is actually in a closet at one point?
Yeah, yeah. After, well, he's height. She hits him over the head.
Right. Oh God, yeah, with that. Yeah, that was quite a moment. I had to rewind it and be like, did she just do what I think she did? Oh,
Yeah,
okay, yeah. All right.
yeah, because he was about to run to he was suspicious that someone was there, and because she was worried that, again, she's sort of, it's like PTSD. She's reminded of her parents not letting her go out with anyone, and so he's about to go in and see Richard Widmark, and so she's got to stop him. But yeah, and then you got Widmark hiding a couple of times as well in the bathroom.
Yeah.
So everyone is in these tight spaces they can't get out of. So no, I like that. I like that aspect of it as well. I'm trying to think if there was anything else I wanted to mention. Was there anything else you wanted to mention about this film?
Well, I did look up the short story that this was based on, or the story it was based on, and right now you can get it for $1.99 on Amazon. Of all of, and
Oh,
they have quite a few. That's the Kindle version. They've got quite a few Charlotte Armstrongs out there, and so had I known, had I done my due diligence, I would have picked this up and tried to read it over the last few weeks. But yeah, super cheap right now.
okay, great. I'll have to check that out. Can you tell us a bit? Can you tell us, for those of you, for people who perhaps haven't heard of your great podcast before, can you tell us a little bit about what it's about?
Sure. Yeah. Every week we look at a different movie. Some months we have themes, other times we don't. Right now, we're just wrapping up a grab bag month, and then we are starting Sci Fi July. I try to get interviews if I possibly can with some of the folks that are behind some of the films that we talk about, or at least adjacent to them. And yeah, so I've got the interviews, and then usually what I hope to have great discussions. I just posted a discussion of a film called Buddy Buddy by Billy Wilder, one of, I think that was his last directorial efforts. And
Oh yeah,
not a lot of people like it. I didn't really care for it
I've
that
never even
much.
heard of it, to be honest.
Yeah, but it was interesting. It was very interesting to watch. And it was based on a play, and which became a movie. And that original movie, which actually was released as a pain in the ass or a pain in the neck, that movie with Lino Ventura was fantastic. And then it's
Oh,
been remade like 4 or 5 times, including a Bollywood version. So I can't wait to see that one.
well, there we go. Awesome.
Yeah.
And where's the best place for people to find you, the podcast online, or follow you on social media?
You can always find it over at projectionboothpodcast.com. And I've got all my Twitters and Facebooks and all that kind of stuff there as well. So, and I'm trying to do Instagram a lot more than I used to. So follow me there as well. I think I'm just at Projection Booth Podcast.
Great, perfect. And I'll leave those links that Mike just mentioned in the description box below. Again, highly recommend checking out Mike's podcast. Mike, thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it that you took the time
Thank
to do
you.
so.
I'm always thrilled to be on the show. It's such a pleasure talking with you, and we're going to get you on the show next year. So
Oh,
look
I
forward
hope
to
so.
that.
Yeah, let me know. Thank you so much, everyone, for watching and or listening. If you are currently listening to my YouTube channel on the audio version of the film podcast, and you've run out of episodes to listen to, head over to the YouTube channel where every single episode that I have ever recorded can be found. YouTube.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies. I also want to thank all of my members on Patreon. If you're interested in becoming a member of my Patreon, head over to the link patreon.com/Robert Bellissimo at the movies for full details. Patreon is bonus content that I create month in and month out, and it is based on polls that I put out at the beginning of every single month, which as a member, you will have access to vote on. So if you like my film podcast and you want to support me over on Patreon, head over to the link for full details. I also want to mention that you can now leave a donation directly onto the YouTube channel if you want to. Right beside the like and dislike and comment buttons right below the video, you will see a tab that says thanks. Just click the thanks tab, and from there, you will be able to leave a donation of whatever you wish. So if you like my work, feel free to do so. And lastly, if this is your first time here on my YouTube channel, or if you haven't already done so, please consider subscribing. It is absolutely free to do so by pressing the Robert Bellissimo at the Movies logo. You will see it floating above my head in the top left corner to your top left in just a second. Just click on that and then click the bell in order to get a notification every time I release one of my new episodes or when I go live. Thank you so much, everyone. I will see you in the next episode.